The Warriors are starting game one of a back-to-back. It's the Pacers and Rockets. They should win those two games. We'll talk about that. I got the greatest, that is Connor Letourneau of the San Francisco Chronicle with me. Connor, you ready to do this?
Yes, thanks for having me.
Let's go, man.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. You can follow Connor Letourneau on Twitter at con_Cron, CON_CHRON, representing his position at the San Francisco Chronicle as the sort of Warriors beat reporter. While they
Warriors beat writer.
Well, they look for that permanent beat writer. And I guess let's start with that. I mean, real quickly, look, I mean, I see all the time people complaining about how, oh, that guy has a check mark. Oh, that guy shouldn't be covering the Warriors. I could do a better job. Now you can. That opportunity is right in front of you. So if someone wants to be the Warriors beat reporter, that position is open for the San Francisco Chronicle. Tell us about that job and what are you guys looking for and how can people apply if they're interested?
Yeah, I mean, so I obviously did that job for 5+ years, and I wouldn't trade that experience for the world. It was a once in a lifetime experience. I would say to anyone who is interested in applying, it is a great place to work. San Francisco Chronicle cares about the right things. They care about good journalism. They care about good storytelling, and they treat their employees well. It's obviously an amazing city in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And then I'm not sure there's a better beat to cover in sports.
Yeah.
And I say that not just because the Warriors are super nationally relevant, but because the access is incredible. Ray Ritter and their PR staff are phenomenal to work with. There's really no limit to the reporting you can do. They let you talk to anyone in the organization. You can spend time away from the arena with players and coaches. That's not true with a lot of NBA teams or a lot of professional teams for that matter. So I think it's an amazing opportunity for someone looking to have that high level beat writing experience. And in terms of what we're looking for, we're looking for someone, basically willing to go the extra mile, because this is a grind of a job. In season, you're working basically 7 days a week. You're doing the travel, you're doing all of it. And we're looking for someone who's up for that type of challenge, but also willing to still go the extra mile and do, work that goes beyond what's right in front of you in terms of game coverage and media availabilities, willing to make that extra call, willing to do the extra legwork. And I think we're also looking for someone who can bring a different voice to the discussion. We have some strong features writers, we have strong columnists, but I think, we want to bring someone in that beat role who can add something we don't already have, someone who's good at connecting with players and coaches and, just has a different perspective on things than myself or Ron or some of our other great people on staff can bring. So, I know the response on it has been phenomenal. We've gotten a lot of applicants. I think we have a really good applicant pool, but, we're still looking. And so if you haven't applied already and you're interested, you should.
There you go, man. And your predecessor, Rusty Simmons, RIP with the SF Chronicle. Reach out to me, Rusty. I want to bring you on if you ever want to tell your side of the story, my man. We love you. But let's talk about Warriors today. They play the Pacers. And I got a feces eating grin on my face. That's the best way I could put this. That's family friendly because of what happened last night with the Pacers. They beat the Lakers. A team that I consider flat out pathetic right now, and I kind of blasted LeBron, and I flat out blasted LeBron on Twitter last night just because they lost the game. It was over. I believe the score was 111-102, and with no time left, LeBron just puts up a layup to get 30 points, stat padding. So he's got a lot of criticism coming his way. But the main story of that game was that Russell Westbrook was not playing the last approximately 4 minutes of the game. Frank Vogel made that decision on his own. He thought it was best for the team. So before we talk about the Warriors' opponent tonight, that same Pacers team, Connor, man, you got insights, dude. Like, what's your take on the Warriors? What once was their main rival, but now we can laugh because they really are not much of a rival. But yeah, give us your take on that.
First of all, which one do you feel more strongly about? Your love for the Warriors or your hate for the Lakers?
Love for the. Oh, no. Okay, let's make one thing very clear. I actually don't mind the Laker fan base.
Is it
I think
mainly
it's a health.
LeBron?
It's LeBron, dude, and it's his fans that drive me crazy. But no, it's not a hatred's a strong word, dude. I use sports hate. Like, I don't hate him personally. I don't hate his
Yeah.
fans personally. I just really get into sports and the rivalry over it and the talking smack with each other. And LeBron right now, he's down, and I'm kicking, man. But no, my love for the Warriors is first and foremost, and I love objectivity, dude. That's why you're here, and I want more of an objective take because I'm blatantly biased.
Right.
Yeah,
Which I like,
talk about.
by the way.
What's
I love biased takes because they're fun. But in terms of the Lakers, I don't understand why some people are still saying that they could be contenders. I mean, they're below 500. They've lost a bunch of games recently. They're like you said, they're a mess. I think the Westbrook experiment was a disaster from the get-go. I could have told you that wasn't going to work. He's not going to coexist with someone like LeBron. And I think there's a track record there. And I think that was predictable. And I mean, the question right now is, can they make the playoffs? I mean, they're the 8th seed, barely ahead of the Clippers, who are in 9th. And then, it looks like they might have to be in the play-in tournament.
Yeah.
So they might not even make the playoffs. And when you look at the Warriors and the Suns and the Grizzlies, who to me are the 3 teams that deserve to be mentioned as serious contenders in the West. Maybe you can throw the Jazz in there too. They're just operating at such a different level. It's not even comparable.
Yeah, it is. And so let's talk about the Pacers. That's who the Warriors play tonight. It's game 1 of a 2-game back-to-back stretch as part of this 7-game homestand, I believe. I can't remember if it's 6 or 7. Yeah, and this is the easy part before it kind of ramps up a little bit in terms of scheduling difficulties. The most I've heard from the Pacers recently is trade talk. I haven't really heard much about their play. Cyrus Saatsaz was huge last night. They got Sabonis. Miles Turner's now out because of that knee injury. But what can you tell us about the Warriors' opponent in tonight's game, the Indiana Pacers?
I'll be honest, I'm kind of like the Warriors in the sense that, the Warriors, when they're going into a game, they don't do a ton of research on the opponent. Like the game prep is minimal. They're mainly worried about rectifying their own mistakes and looking in the mirror. And that's kind of how I approach game coverage. Like I definitely have a working knowledge of what's going on with every team, but I'm not doing deep analysis breakdowns ahead of games because that's just doesn't serve me in terms of what my job is. But the Pacers, like you said, the fact that every news item that's coming out of Indiana is just about trade speculation tells you all you need to know about where they're at. I think that the ship has sailed on any real contention or possibilities for them, and they're in a place where they probably need to just press abort and just start over. And I think that would start with trading Domantas Sabonis, who, it sounds like they're open to trading at this point. There was that report, I think, yesterday from the SAC-B that the Kings are going after Sabonis and would be willing to dangle De'Aaron Fox, which is really an intriguing possibility for the Pacers. Yes. I've always felt like every team, the Warriors are linked to every big name guy who's potentially on the market. And I've always felt like Domantas Sabonis would be a really good fit with the Warriors.
Agreed.
I just don't see how that could actually happen.
Also agree.
Given what they would have to give up. And the Warriors, I just aren't willing to do that. Any trade for someone like that at this point is probably going to sit around Jonathan Kuminga. If you asked me a year ago, I would have said it would centered around Wiseman, but I think the market value for Kuminga is significantly higher than Wiseman right now. And given what we've seen from Kuminga the past few days and really all season, you can't let that go. I mean,
no, heck no.
This guy is 19. He's productive for a winning team right now. He's slowly earned himself a spot in the rotation. He's starting with Draymond out. The upside is through the roof. I truly believe that this guy can be a perennial all-star guy. I'm not saying
Agreed.
he will be, but I think he can be. And you don't just give that up. So yeah.
Heck no, man. No, I think Dub Nation's in agreement with you. Kuminga is a lifer, dude. He is the future of this team, and he's going to be the reason why if the Warriors extend this dynasty Spurs style 15, 20 years, it's going to be because of him largely. We're going to talk about the Warriors and so much more with the great Connor Letourneau. I'm so happy you're joining me this morning. But first, let's talk about one of our really longtime sponsors, BetOnline. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the #1 spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. It's a new year, and it's a new updated desktop and mobile website that they're providing. So sign up today, and you can receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code Locked On to get started. Again, that is Locked On. If you want to apply that promo code to get a 50% welcome bonus from football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline.ag is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. I sometimes pump those out. I'm sometimes a guest on those shows. Listen to Locked On Now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or watch it on the Locked On NBA YouTube channel. You know, Connor, I'm really stoked you're joining me, man, just on a personal level. My dog passed away 3.5 weeks ago, and the only reason why I bring it up is because I have not felt like the same person since then. I don't think I'm as sharp as I used to be. I'm not as focused as I used to be. I didn't think I'd grieve like this, but
I'm sorry,
I'm
man.
really,
That's
it's okay. But I'm so happy you're with me this morning. Because I feel like for the sake of the people watching and listening, it makes a better product. And I'll be back to 100% at some point. I just didn't realize how much I love this animal, and he was like a baby to me. Anyways, the point I bring that up is because you weren't supposed to join me this morning. Because usually on the days that the Warriors have a game at home, they have a morning shoot around that the media attends, and you're allowed to ask questions, and you're doing your own observations for your content. They canceled that this morning. That's not a usual thing. And I was just curious to know, do you have any suspicions why? Do you think that's an indicator of anything, or do you think they're just taking a day off of rest?
They also canceled practice yesterday. And historically, in the lead up to a back-to-back, you'll either have a practice the day before the first game, or if you don't have a practice the day before the first game, you'll have a shoot around the morning of the first game, and then you will not have a shoot around the morning of the second game, and then you usually historically do not practice the day after the game. I will say the way the league is trending, and the Warriors are a part of that, more and more shoot-arounds and practices are being canceled in favor of just rest. I think rest is valued more and more, especially with what's going on in the league with the COVID outbreaks, and the Warriors are dealing with some injuries, most notably to Draymond, and I think Steve just decided, this is a good opportunity to just rest up. We have guys dealing with a bunch of minor injuries, even like Gary Payton II and some other guys are like Otto Porter, and some other guys are dealing with minor injuries. And so you might as well just rest them up and, get ready for this back-to-back. But, luckily for the Warriors, they're playing two teams that are very beatable.
Yeah.
And I don't expect it to be any major issue, especially with Draymond, even with Draymond out.
And Draymond is out. The latest math is approximately 2 weeks. Could be realistically maybe even 4 to 6. The Warriors typically look at the long game, and when it comes to a back injury, I feel like Steve Kerr has a particular sensitivity to that based off his own history with his back surgery and how much he's denounced that and how he doesn't recommend back surgeries for individuals. And let's hope Draymond's okay. Dude, you told me something that was interesting, shifting gears for a moment. I can't remember if you published this publicly, if you told me privately. You thought right now in the current MVP standings, right, that Stephen Curry is 6th in your rankings. Is that correct? And
Yeah.
who is your top 5 preceding him?
Yeah, so I was asked that in my mailbag the other day, and I went back and looked at it and put some thought into it. And I don't think you can put Steph above 6 right now. I don't think
Wow.
that would be fair to the other candidates. I think Steph, obviously Steph, even on a quote unquote down year, is transcendent and incredible and revolutionizing the game. But he is having his worst shooting season by a relatively wide margin. He's
Yeah.
toiling through his worst shooting slump of his entire career. It looks like he's slowly starting to break out of that, but it's just hard to justify giving him the MVP or even having him in the top 3 discussion when his numbers are so far below his career averages
Right.
in his points per game. Same thing. I think this would be his worst scoring season since 2016-17, and that doesn't include 2019-20 when he was limited to 5 games.
Right.
But the guys I have ahead of him are Giannis, Nikola Jokic, Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid, and DeMar DeRozan. I think the only guy that you on that list that you could maybe put Steph above is DeMar DeRozan, but I give DeMar the nod there just because he has been the driving force behind this sudden surge in Chicago. Chicago is probably the most surprising team in the league, and it's largely because of DeMar DeRozan. I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, and I think that's why I have him in the top 5 over Steph. Even though Steph is Steph and is playing really well defensively and all these things, you can owe a lot of their success also to Draymond and Wiggins, whereas I think in Chicago, like DeRozan deserves almost all the credit for what's going on there.
Yeah, Dieter would take so much offense to what you just said because he thinks Zach LaVine deserves a ton of credit for the Bulls' success as well. And he's
but who's like who's the new piece that suddenly was the catalyst to their rise? I mean, that's DeMar DeRozan.
I hear you. No, I hear you, man. And here's where I'll counter with you. I have a couple things to throw back at you on that. One is I don't like DeRozan over Steph for the simple reason that the 2 times they played against each other, the Warriors just mopped the floor. So I do take those head-to-heads in consideration. I don't like Jokic for the simple reason that the Nuggets' overall record is not good enough at this point. If you're going to consider Jokic, then Steph should have won it last year. But no one really considered him in the grand scheme of things just because the Warriors didn't even make the playoffs. I mean, they were the 8th seed. And then Durant, do you still think he's going to be in it now that he has a knee injury? That's the only reason why I take him out, because he's going to miss like a month at least.
I mean, I do it based off where we are at this moment. I don't like to project ahead when you're asked those sorts of questions. So I'm just basically saying, if we were awarding the MVP tomorrow, what would the list be? And so that's what I'm going off of. Will Durant probably go down the list because of this injury? For sure. But that's not how I took the question.
Yeah, I hear you, man. Do you get a vote for MVP?
I basically trade off year to year.
We've talked about this a while ago.
Yeah, I historically trade off with the Mercury news writer. So like Wes and I would take turns. They kind of give the nod more to traditional media like print journalism. I don't know if the athletic writer gets a vote. Yeah, so I'm not going to be the beat writer by the time voting comes, but I am voting for All-Star this week.
Oh.
So there's that.
All right, we'll get to that in a second. And just the fact, well, I guess I don't even know if the Mercury News has a beat writer right now. And I got that they have that.
So
Evan
it's funny, like one of the best teams in the league, and the Chronicle and the Mercury News don't have beat writers right now. just because of the timing. The Mercury News writer left right before the season, and so they've been trying to make a hire mid-season. And we had a change on the beat just a couple months ago, and so I'm filling in until Ron Krychek and I are filling in until we make a hire. But we still have people at every practice shooting around a game. It's not like we're ignoring our Warriors coverage. We just don't have that like fully dedicated person right now.
Yeah.
But that will change soon.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is because like I don't even know who from the Mercury News would cast that vote. this right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's weird.
The guy filling in right now is Evan Weeback, who's done a nice job, but he's not going to be staying on that beat. They're actually in the process of making a hire, I believe, right now. So that woman who I believe they're going to hire would be the person.
Okay, all right. Oh, you know who they're going to hire? Can you reveal anything?
She's actually covering this homestand.
Okay.
And she's kind of in an audition period. So if it goes well,
gotcha. I hear you on that. Well, when we come back, we'll wrap things up on the MVP talk. And the reason why I want to still talk about it is because a month ago or a month and a half ago, there was no debate. Stephen Curry seemed to have that MVP, his third MVP, locked up. And then in this last month and a half, some peculiar things happened. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what's to come and wrap things up with Connor Letourneau. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Connor Letourneau joins me. You can follow him on Twitter at con_Chron. That's CON_CHRON, representing his position with the San Francisco Chronicle. You do phenomenal work with him. What happened, do you think, to Steph? I keep saying Steve for some reason. What do you think happened to Stephen Curry in December and January? Typically, these are his dog days. Like historically, his numbers always go down in December and January. He made a very interesting comment a week or so ago talking about how he looks at the season as 3 parts. Yeah. And in part 2 is where he kind of seems to take it as a mental rest period, as a take it slow and easy period, which could be the reason why his numbers slow down. There is a correlation there, but these are historically low numbers by his standards. The 3-point chase, I think, played a part in this. What are your thoughts on Stephen Curry's recent slump? I use air quotes by his standards.
I don't have a lot of thoughts about it, to be honest, because I think these things just happen. I think if you watch what he's been doing, I think he's been forcing things a little bit. I think he needs to just kind of trust his teammates a little bit and just do what he had done in the past in terms of just trusting the ball movement, getting to his spots. I think he's been dribbling a little bit too much at times. I think he's been trying to make things happen a little bit too much. But I think he's already slowly breaking out of the slump, and I don't expect it to be a huge concern going forward. I think that his numbers will even out, and I think by the end of the season he'll be shooting around 40% from 3. I think, like you said, everyone is kind of experiencing the dog days right now. The Warriors are notorious for really struggling at this time of year.
Yeah,
every year I've covered them, this has been a grind. Doesn't help that Draymond's out. Doesn't help that, even though they're happy to have Clay back, his minutes are constantly changing. I think the lineups have been a real issue, and I think everyone's having a hard time getting a rhythm right now because the lineups are so different night to night. It feels like Steve is rolling out 24 plus lineups every game, and it's just hard for guys to know where to be when there's different pieces out there at all times. I think that's part of why Steve basically announced the other night that Kuminga is going to be the starting power forward until Draymond comes back, which was a big statement, especially for a guy who's, 19 and still very much finding his footing in the league. But I think part of that was just Steve wants some consistency. And so it's like, this is going to be a really good opportunity for Kuminga to show us what he can do. And that's what I'm personally most curious about in the next couple of weeks while Draymond's out is just, can Kuminga prove that he can be a helpful rotation player for a title contending team in the playoffs? Yeah. There's a big difference between playing rotation minutes in the regular season and playing rotation minutes in the playoffs. And actually, I think I'm going to do a piece this morning that looks at who is basically competing to be a playoff rotation player. And those guys are like Kuminga, Damian Lee, Juan Toscano Anderson. Those guys still have something to prove when it comes to like, are you going to play in the playoffs? Because the rotation is going to go from 10, 11 guys per game to like 8. And so it'll be interesting to see who's playing when it really matters.
Yeah, and I could think of Bielitsa being a guy who needs to earn that.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like Bielitsa and Juan Toscano Anderson they started shooting way too many threes, and that was part of the offense kind of stagnating. And this last game, I saw them finally revert back to the basics. Bielitsa was playing in the post a lot. He was staying near the rim to help with rebounding. JTA was not heaving up these threes. I mean, look, I know they make them sometimes, and the percentages continue to support them shooting it, but timing is everything. And call me old school. I'm still a believer that 2-point baskets have a value, right? I mean, even if it's just to build confidence and get your offense rolling with momentum, you don't have to just chuck up threes every single play. And I feel like that's what they were doing for a lot of that. But that's just my opinion on the matter. Dude, when you do your mailbag segments, like I love mailbag segments, and that's because I grew up in a day where I actually read a newspaper and people actually sent mail. When I watched David Letterman, I used to love his mailbag segment. It's always just been a fun media angle for me. Dude, how does that work for you these days in the modern era? Is it a ton of emails? Do you look at replies? Like, are you collecting everything? Like, how does that work?
I do. I basically just put the call out for Twitter and go off what I get on Twitter, but I occasionally will get emailed ones that I'll answer. And I've come to really appreciate it. It's I think it's a really good way to get a pulse on what fans care about. There have been a lot of times where I'll get questions from readers and it'll kind of spur story ideas for me, because you realize, oh, I hadn't really been thinking about that, but that's obviously something people care about. And it's also a good way to hit notes that I wouldn't be hitting in my day-to-day coverage. And
right,
you'd be shocked how well those mailbags do numbers wise. Like, they do really well. And I was pleasantly surprised when we started doing them.
I believe it, man. And it adds perspective for you, right? Because the readers are bringing up new points and angles you might not have thought of. No, I personally love it, man. And thanks for answering that question. Last thing I wanted to touch on you with before we call it a day. I've seen something now in the last 2 games offensively from the Warriors, which I love. And talking about Kuminga, he's been involved in this set a lot. And that's a Stephen Curry decoy screen. And what I mean by that, it's a pick and roll with Stephen Curry and Kuminga. And what opposing teams are doing now is refusing to ever leave Stephen Curry alone, right? So when he sets those screens and he's setting those pick and rolls, a lot of the times the second defender is not following the pick. And so Kuminga has been seeing a lot of open looks, and I think that's been contributing to his bigger numbers. I was wondering if you've noticed anything from that, and if you agree with my observations on that play, or if you haven't. I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I have noticed that, and I think that's definitely been helpful. One thing Steve is good about, especially with the young guys, finding reads and situations where they're going to get easy looks and be put in a position to succeed. You saw toward the end of last season, Steve calling a lot more high pick and rolls with Steph and Wiseman, and that's when Wiseman finally started to get in a rhythm offensively. And I don't think Kuminga needs it to that degree, because I think Kuminga is a better fit in this system than Wiseman is naturally, just given his skill set. But I do think that it's very helpful when you can find little wrinkles in the offense to help him find openings, and I think that's a good example of them doing that.
Any updates on James Wiseman? I mean, you're as much of an insider as they come. You're around this team all the time. That Anthony Slater piece last week, I think, stunned a lot of people that Wiseman had a follow-up procedure. Like, is he? Do you think we're going to even see him play this? Faith in that? Like, what's your take?
Yeah,
on it?
that was a weird situation, because I've covered the Warriors for over 5 years, and I've never known them to purposely hide injury information. And Steve was asked directly about Wiseman almost every day, and he said repeatedly, there's been no setbacks, there's been no setbacks, there's been no setbacks.
Right.
And then it turns out that he had a second procedure, which is the definition of a setback.
Yes.
And
yes.
It's like, okay, you guys are clearly purposely misleading us. Like, why is that? And I've been trying to figure that out. I think I don't want to speculate too much because I don't know.
Right.
Sometimes there've been, and this is not a criticism of Steve, but sometimes Steve is not fully caught up on the medical information because he has so many things going on. So maybe
Right.
Steve like overlooked it. I think that's possible. And it could be just an innocent thing like that. It could be that they're really trying to safeguard and protect Wiseman because he does have a history and a reputation for being very sensitive and hard on himself. And I think he's already under so much outside pressure and scrutiny that maybe they just didn't want him to have to deal with the added mental toll that this information being out there would be. But, obviously it's good that it's out there because it just wasn't making sense why he hadn't been cleared for contact. I mean,
exactly.
As of late November, it looked like he was going to come back before Klay, and now Klay's out there and playing, and Wiseman still has not even been cleared for contact. It's been over 9 months, and that it's starting to get weird a little bit. So at least we know why now. And I don't expect him to come back before the All-Star break. I think he will probably come back sometime shortly after the All-Star break, but I don't think you can depend on him to be a real factor this season. I think he's probably going to play. I think you can play him 10 to 15 minutes a night against bad teams, but when you're talking about high-level teams and especially high-stakes moments like the playoffs, like I don't know I'd feel comfortable playing him right now, especially just given the fact that he didn't prove he could be a helpful rotation player last season, and now he's coming off a serious injury. I don't think he's going to have enough time to get comfortable enough to be a real factor, which is unfortunate. It's basically it's like a second lost season for him. I mean, this has been a worst case scenario in terms of the start of his career. I'm not saying he won't be a good player down the line, but this is just not how anyone wanted to see it starting.
No, we want to see him just play. I mean, that's all I want. And again, I literally asked Steve Kerr at the Klay Thompson press conference the day before, or the very day he officially announced himself on Instagram that he was gonna play in that Cavaliers game. I asked him at the press conference at the very end. I wanted a James Wiseman update. Everyone's just talking about Klay, and his answer was just like what you said, that it's coming along. He's making progress, and literally like a day or two later, that report came out that he underwent an arthroscopic procedure on that same knee. So let's hope he plays. That's all we can hope for. Connor, you're amazing, dude. I love doing this with you every time. I hope to make this a very regular thing with you if possible. You can follow Connor Letourneau again on Twitter at @con_cron. And before I let you go, man, tonight's game, BetOnline.ag is a longtime sponsor. The Warriors are favored by 11.5. The over/under is 216.5. I like the over. 11.5 is a big number, man. Any predictions on that?
11.5 is a big number. I would take the under just because I think 11.5 is a lot. And without Draymond, I'm not sure that they can blow out this team. But the Pacers aren't very good. So I also wouldn't be surprised. I'm not a betting man, and this is why, because I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, the NBA is so random.
It is.
Like, you can't really predict anything in the NBA. So who knows? I'm not going to pretend to know.
I love it. That's honestly, that's all you can ask for. And again, you can follow me on Twitter at DogSurfRoadShow and this program on Twitter at LockedOnDubs, man. We'll talk soon, brother. Thank you for coming on. And Dub Nation, let's go Warriors. Later.